Okay, the first time I saw at Stephen Greer's Flare, for some reason, instead of my brain going to Flare guns, my brain went to like when you go to Red Robin and they have that vest with all of the buttons on it. I don't know why, but I just like saw Stephen Greer and like a meme button vest jumper.
See, I thought you were gonna say you thought it meant Stephen Greer's like personality.
Oh,
like there's that spark he's got, you know.
He does have a special something for sure.
Hello and welcome back to The Secret Knowledge. My name is Shane.
And I'm Allyson.
And today we're going to be talking about episode 5 of the Stephen Greer Disclosure series on Gaia,
which is called Dangers to the Missions, which I think requires that we take a pause for how much whoever is doing the copy editing of this project loves a plural. I had a very difficult time saying, I think it was episode 2.
It was, catalysts for contact.
Which is just not catalysts for contact. I'm sorry. We probably shouldn't be doing that into the mics. It's just a horrible sound. And then at the beginning of these episodes, what flashes on the screen during the intro?
Extraterrestrial intelligences.
Just everybody take a moment to say catalysts for contact and intelligences.
I feel like this may be a tangent we don't even need to go down, but it's just like danger to the mission.
Dangers.
But that's a perfectly fine title.
Oh, yeah.
Just as singular nouns. So you were so close. So this episode, as we talked about, it's called Dangers to the Missions. And in this, Stephen Greer relates some stories about danger that has come his way, threats he's received, times he's been otherwise harmed or targeted for some kind of abuse. Takes up a good portion of this episode. So one of the first things that came up for me in this episode, Stephen Greer is talking about how there was a CE5 experience where as soon as they saw an alien light go up into the sky, they were flooded by military personnel. Planes, helicopters, whatever, surrounded the location. Stephen Greer goes on to explain that, these people just don't understand how this works. These aren't necessarily ships coming to the planet. These could be consciousnesses popping out of nowhere. He says they could go from the ground to the sky like a flare gun. It almost seems like he's kind of covering his tracks there. Mm-hmm. Stephen is telling you how the aliens appear, and they might look like a flare gun, but that's normal.
Yeah. So earlier today, I was trying to post that we had put our latest episode on Spotify, and I really had a hard time. I didn't tweet it because I just couldn't, but I had said something to the effect of, how many times can we say that Stephen Greer doesn't have the evidence to back up his claims, because I felt like every episode on some level we're just repeating that message over and over again. And true, it's going to be restated here as well. But this episode definitely feels like it went to a totally different place in terms of the claims it was making, rather than how some of those episodes kind of blend together in terms of content.
Right. Like in a previous episode, Stephen might say he received a certain document from someone and it implied this or that, What jumped out to me in this episode is he mentions what he calls really nasty directional energy weapons.
Which, that's just one of those phrases that is just rolled right through. Really nasty directional energy weapons.
Does Billy Carson ask for clarification?
He does not. Has that phrase come up in any of his other documentaries to the extent that we could be like, oh, well, the Greer audience by and large already knows what really nasty directional energy weapons are? if that appeared, not much, because I do not recall that phrase, and I have watched his documentaries an embarrassing amount of times.
I don't recall that phrase either. And what Greer says happens with these is that they are able to give people diseases at the speed of light. He says scalar. He explains in every single episode what scalar means, and it means at the speed of light.
And when you asked me if there was a place that I wanted to start in this episode, I almost immediately went there, but it felt too heavy right out of the gate. But since we were, reading at Hissing UFOs mentions to chemo, the first thing that popped into my head was like, oh my gosh, cancer is I don't know what to say featured, but it plays a role in this episode.
Mm-hmm. There are two people. Stephen Greer says at least two people he mentions who received cancer. There's a woman he worked with, right?
Yes, Sherry.
Oh, it was Sherry who died of the cancer.
I believe so. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you if it had been her. And who is Sherry?
I don't recall the relationship that both CE5ers?
I think Sherry was someone who introduced him to an alien, but we'll get to that in a second.
To kindness?
To kindness.
Oh, okay. Kindness has given me strong Lavi vibes, which if you're on UFO Twitter, you'll get what I mean.
What is that?
You haven't been spending enough time out there in the Wild West, or you'd know.
What's Lavi?
Lavi's for a different day.
Yeah, Stephen, I call him Stephen. Stephen Greer says that Sherry got cancer, and he himself did too.
But two different kinds of cancer.
Yeah, did he say which kinds?
He mentions the specific kinds, namely to highlight that his cancer was a worse, more dangerous form of cancer than Sherry got. Yet
Stephen survived, and though he was supposed to die. He says, I was supposed to die first. So that's sort of where we pick up with Dr. Stephen Greer at the beginning of this episode. He's saying,
Stephen Greer outwits cancer.
Stephen Greer outwits cancer. Stephen Greer is not only being, harassed by the government now, he's being attacked by them in a really, really nasty way. He also says that once a year, someone approached him and offered him protection. Each year, a year would go by, and this meeting would occur again from 1992 to 1998. And Stephen Greer denied protection every single time.
Well, Stephen Greer's biggest regret is that no one has ever been as brave as him. So it doesn't surprise me that he forwent the protection.
I would also say, I think a mark of this episode that makes it a little bit different than previous ones is kind of like you introduced. Now more than ever, we have to take Stephen Greer at his word, because sometimes he's saying, a lot of times he likes to name drop people.
He literally says,
he says, I know who a lot of people are. and he says that when talking about George Bush Sr. and Dick Cheney and like two senators.
Which my three favorite Greer quotes from the episode, that really nasty directional energy weapons and solid state 0 point free energy device.
I was wondering about that one. I thought he was going to say solid state hard drive at first. But so Stephen likes to name drop people, and he still did that more than enough in this episode. But I also noticed this episode featured many more shadow people than before. There were people attacking Greer, people he spoke to who said this or this, and now more than ever, I really felt at times that I was just watching Stephen Greer's imagination at play. I actually had a thought to myself as we were sitting here where I was thinking, about what we've kind of learned since starting this, which is that maybe a lot of the UFO things we've been exposed to is way more BS than not just that we assumed, but that we even knew we could assume, I wondered if Stephen Greer was just a convincing guy, weaving some science fiction for a group of people who would follow him. I think Charles Hall got me thinking about that a lot. Not that we're going to go into Charles Hall right now, but I think now more than ever, as Stephen gets more ridiculous, I just see this like science fiction story just folding out in front of me. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where my head was at for a lot of this episode.
Okay, Okay, so some big claims that he makes. The fact that he outwitted cancer. He says that William Colby died in a wet works operation. But then perhaps the most interesting of these claims is when he was introduced to an extraterrestrial named Kindness.
Kindness, who Sherry introduced him to.
Yes.
We don't hear much about how the meeting occurred.
No, but he does draw a picture of Kindness, which is why this was giving me strong Lavi vibes. And he says that Kindness's face was a perfect circle.
I wonder if that's like a 2D circle, like it appeared as like a... I mean, if it's interdimensional, maybe it doesn't appear as a 3D...
Well, Anjali said Lavi appeared to her in a number of different orientations. So I think my answer to that question on behalf of Stephen Greer to you is whatever it wanted to be at the time.
I kind of feel like meeting an alien named Kindness that your friend introduces you to because Sherry is an interstellar ambassador, that should be its whole own movie. Have you ever heard about this before?
Especially because this is another one of the... He keeps saying that there's all of this evidence. Specifically, he tells us that Kindness has appeared at every single CE5 event that has happened, which is strange because we've read a disclaimer about his conferences that says that the extraterrestrials will appear in a number of ways, or maybe not at all if there's certain military engagement going on that they don't like, or if someone in the group is not pure of heart enough and believing in the right way.
Someone's vibe is off.
Yeah, this... if there's bad vibes, man. So if Kindness has appeared somehow still at every CE5 event, why aren't we saying here's Kindness, here's Kindness, here's Kindness, and then showing us how you are certain, you being Stephen Greer, is certain that that entity appearing over and over, maybe in the same form, maybe not, is the same thing.
Well, honestly, I think Steve's answer to that would be, well, she didn't appear to everyone else, but I knew she was there.
Specifically says great many pictures of her craft. He claims that they have a great, not just in an ambiguous way, a great many pictures of her craft. Like, you can flash the pictures of the craft at that moment.
Yeah, I know. You've pointed that out a few times, and I finally really noticed, like, this series isn't just, Steve kind of mouthing off. It's really low effort. There are times where you should be showing us like what Stephen Greer is talking about. It should be flashing on the screen, and it's just not. And it's like, why?
Right.
Like,
and when I was asking myself earlier, how many times can we just say over and over, Stephen Greer is bad at proving things? Like, why are we still doing this kickback in this way? And it's because there is so much nonsense that there's no way that I could intake all of this information in a timely manner and then be able to re-articulate it and distill it to its most essential parts, because it's just too disorienting the entire time. And moreover, whatever amount of time that would take, it wouldn't merit it. Like, we have to go through this series relatively quickly, because we can't be watching these episodes multiple times and like really mulling this stuff over. I mean, the point, I feel like, of this series is that we don't need to be fact checking all of Stephen Greer's claims, because we already have enough evidence to show that his interest isn't in being transparent, being credible, and proving things in a reasonable, or at least displaying the evidence in a manner that someone can reasonably intake. Like, forget that. Don't waste your time. Move on. Next person. There's enough people that haven't gotten the chance to speak about their experiences or have their claims vetted.
And I think, we first really learned that when we attempted to research unacknowledged. And we had this cute little Google Doc where like Allyson had her stuff she was going to research. I had some of my stuff I was going to research. We're like, all right, let's meet back in like a week and see what we find. And like, I think we both learned very quickly that Stephen Greer media, it really is like a hydra. Like once you've cut off one head, there's like 5 more that just pop out. And it's like, man, it's very difficult to not just follow claims to their source, but to piece one from the other. Things overlap in very frustrating ways, which is why I was thinking, just kind of putting a cap on the kindness scenario. When you look at maybe episode 6, he jumps back and it's all about kindness. I never know what the next episode's going to be about. So this is just my review of this episode, but it's like, man, so many of the show's themes up to this point you'd think could be discussed through this kindness encounter. It's like, tell us how it was set up. Tell us how Sherry did this. If your whole thing is peaceful contact, why not the fuck just do it through Sherry? She claims to be able to pull aliens out of the sky for you to talk to. Like, this really would have been interesting to zero in on, give us some more context about. And it's like, I don't even know if it's 5 minutes of the episode.
Right.
And it's such a groundbreaking event to say, I sat down with an alien. This isn't, I saw an alien in a sky. This isn't a CE5 retreat got crazy. This is, I sat down with an alien named Kindness. I drew a picture of it. And it's not even 5 minutes of the episode.
Okay, so another example of this is he states specifically that one of the CE5 events that was particularly arresting was at Mount Shasta, where a massive object could be seen from Vancouver to LA. And he's claiming that this was one event that was seen in all of these different places. That seems like yet another one of those big claims. Like he's saying Kindness's craft was seen multiple times at these CE5 events. This is another claim that if he wanted to give and show support, where are all the headlines from Vancouver to LA on approximately the same day of this craft that everyone has seen? It's just like time and time again, there's all of this information that he's claiming to have this pile of evidence on that we never see. And perhaps you could argue, or he could argue, that information is in the archives, or that's the information that he was really laying out at the National Press Club. To that, I would say, so you're done? You're making all of these documentaries, all of these Gaia whatever special series, and you can't deign to tell the evidence again on the platforms where you're reaching the most people, like everybody else? Hey, it's over there. Go look it up yourselves. Like, that doesn't make sense. Also, the website's trash.
Allyson, I think you finally slayed him, because I think that's finally the elucidation we've been trying to say, which is like, it's not just that it's not there. It's not just that Greer lies about everything. It's that he's also lying about who he is if that shit isn't on the screen constantly. Right. Because all he's ever doing is sitting down as the most serious man in the world and begging you to believe him that this stuff is true. You finally, I think that was really what we just needed.
That's what I gathered from watching this episode on Gaia, wrestling with all day. How many, why do we need to make these episodes? Yeah.
And maybe we will learn when we watch the next episode that we'd rather do 6 and 7 as a bundle. You know, you never know. However, I kind of wanted to piggyback off of what you were talking about just now, where you were saying, well, where are those news articles? Like, would he not be painstakingly, sharing this stuff? And I thought it was interesting that he mentioned the National Press Club event, which we researched, you researched for Unacknowledged, and learned, it wasn't what he made it out to be.
It at least wasn't presented in a holistic way that gave you a sense of what that event was. Definitely.
And when you look at what it really is and you look at that movie, it's pretty clear.
Yes.
Anyway, he sort of weaves another thread into this story, which he had alluded to, I think, in the Cosmic Hoax documentary, but that's just off the top of my head, that for the first hour of the National Press Club event, that their signal was being jammed, and that the night before he had seen men on the building and blah, 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 blah. And, I don't know. Maybe it's true. Maybe for that first hour, the signal was bad, it wasn't on TV or whatever. I also wonder if maybe it was never going to be on TV, and maybe Steven's a little hurt about that.
Right. We just can't ever trust that he's presenting something in a way that most people would accept.
Right.
How it's appearing.
Or like, to his understanding, was it going to be national coverage and then it was local? Like, we don't know. I don't know how much I believe this whole jamming thing, but that's what I'm saying Steven would say to you when you ask him where those news clippings are. He'd say, well, they've gotten rid of them, or they blocked them from people's computers. Like, this goes back to episode 1. The sword that can beat anything and the shield that can block anything. It's just whatever your concern is, Steven Greer has an answer for it.
So the episode, one thing that I liked about this episode was it had a clear sort of narrative arc. We introduce, I'm training ambassadors to the universe. To those ambassadors are being threatened, attacked, sometimes even killed. And then we end with, why is this the case? It's because of false government disclosure, and the government is trying to unite everyone in war against the aliens so they can justify their weapons spending, their control, etc., etc.
He even talked to a Sea Lord.
When I saw that in my notes again, I wanted to say that there was actually a fourth phrase that stood out to me in this episode. And I know that's apparently like the real name of a general is a 5-star Sea Lord. And I'm not trying to make fun of anyone's culture, but that's lovely.
Yeah, I noticed a good portion. So most of my notes from this episode have to do up until kindness and a little bit after, because I kind of felt that a huge chunk of the middle of this episode was basically a recap of his movie Cosmic Hoax, where he talks about the exo-racism, a Steven Greer concept where the government is priming you to really be racist against aliens. I feel like there are people maybe better with language and breaking down the implications of calling something exo-racism. To maybe I would leave that to them. I just think it's kind of something he really pushes hard, and I personally think he does it because just in our current like media climate, like if you attach racism onto maybe a headline, Steven Greer exo-racism, I don't know, maybe that's me getting a little cynical, but this exo-racism thing is a new term for Greer, I've noticed. Encountered it for the first time in Cosmic Hoax, which came out just this year, and there's just a part of me that feels like he might be like buying in on some political unrest and like just general social upheaval. Yeah,
it's another one of those vague things that people can agree with, and it's like racism is bad. Greer is using the UFO phenomena to draw on that pathos now, or find a way to twist it into relying on that pathos.
Right, because no one wants to be caught saying, exo-racism, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Okay, well, do you have any closing thoughts on dangers to the missions?
Well, I do have more to say about Billy Carson, but I'm going to leave that for a different day because there are some materials that I want to consult first. But I will be returning to Billy Carson. But I did jot down in my last notes from the Gaia series is I wanted to see if they are filming all of these episodes all at once or if they're being chopped into more than one episode from one long take. And the note I have on their clothes was silver blue check tie, which I don't believe made an appearance in this episode. Therefore, either they were changing outfits in between episodes and did this within a few days, or they did sit down and do this 10 times. And I would love if anyone knows the answer to that to let me know.
My guess is going to be, you know how they do it on Jeopardy?
Oh, do tell.
So I'm pretty sure if you show up to Jeopardy for filming, you have to bring 5 outfits. Because if you do win 5 times in a row, you'll be there filming all day, and they want you to appear as if you've been there all week.
Well, I don't want to rewatch this series.
I don't either.
But I would love for someone to go through and take stock of all the various pairs of jeans that Stephen Greer wears on these and let us know how many designated outfits there have been throughout this series.
I do love Steven's jeans. That's one of my closing thoughts. Just love seeing those jeans. The other thing I would say, and this may be a little controversial, I think this was my favorite episode so far.
I do too.
And maybe that's because we really got to see Steve in his element, just talking about whatever he wants to talk to. But this was a fun one to watch. It really was. I laughed out loud multiple times, not just at Steven, but I feel like in a way I was laughing with Steven.
Well, I think that about closes this episode of our TSK Kickback on Stephen Greer's series on Gaia. If you guys want or are enjoying coming along this ride with us, please give us a like, a subscribe, hit the notification bell. Leave us a comment if you know where any of this information is about Stephen Greer's CE5 conferences, maybe being a little suspicious. We'd love to kind of be able to get all of that information in one spot and look at it. And other than that, everybody please stay alert and watch out for those really nasty directional energy weapons out there.